On this show, we explore the real stories behind entrepreneurship, the unexpected turns, the lessons learned, and the mindset shifts that come from building a business. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Conrad. My guest today is Lance Cayko, co-founder and principal of F9 Productions, a Colorado-based architecture and design build firm. Lance didn't start his career behind a desk. He began in the trades, working as a carpenter and contractor across North Dakota, Montana, and Idaho before earning his degrees in architecture and co-founding his own firm. That hands-on background continues to shape how he approaches both design and business with a focus on practicality, quality, and client experience. In addition to leading F9 Productions, Lance is also the co-host of Inside the Firm, a popular podcast where he and his business partner, Alex Gore, share honest insights about what it really takes to run an architecture and construction company. In this episode, we'll talk about Lance's path from the job site to the boardroom and what inspired him to start his own firm, how he balances creativity with profitability, and the lessons he's learned about leadership, risk, and growing along the way. My conversation with Lance Cayko begins right now. Stick around. Hey, Lance, welcome to the program. I'm glad you're here today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. So, Lance, before founding F9 Productions, you spent years working in the trades. As a carpenter, I believe. How did that early hands-on experience influence the way you approach business and design today?
It's where I found my mentor. It's where I experienced, before I even read the book, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad experience, because that my first boss, his name is Bruce, I still talk to him every week. We rekindled our just relationship a couple years ago. His wife reached out to me, and it was right when I started doing guesting like this on podcasts. I'd been a podcast host for about 4 or 5 years previous to getting on, and she said, "Hey, Bruce thinks about you often, and just seeing how you're doing." And I go, "Oh man, I just talked about him on the show," and I told the story of how he was the first one to really open my eyes to entrepreneurship and the value of working with your hands, building, how you can build a business. So if it wasn't for that experience at 13, I definitely would not be here today for sure. And I kind of owe a lot to him. And the way it breaks down is, I tried farming with my dad I grew up between a cattle ranch and a sugar beet farm, Northwest North Dakota. And on the sugar beet farm, I tried irrigating these sugar beets with my dad for about a week. Didn't last very long. I was 13, kind of rebellious. Didn't really get along with him. Just hated the work. It wasn't that I was against the hard work, because then I called I told him I was going to quit, and I called his best friend, who was Bruce at the time, this general contractor, and I said, "Hey, I'll do whatever it takes." I always wanted to build stuff.
Anything else, right?
Anything. Like, I'll pick up garbage. And he goes, "Oh, perfect. You can be my gopher." And I go, "Cool. I'll pay $7.25 an hour." I was all excited. I go, "What's a gopher?" And he goes, "You can go for this, go for that. When you're done going for the things, you can get up on the roof and roof." And I was the best dang gopher he ever had, because I wanted to learn how to roof. About halfway through the summer, he pulls me aside and gives me the business lesson. And it was, how much do you think I'm charging per clients for your time and labor? And I shot back, $7.25, because that's what you're paying me. And he said, "No, it's like 3 or 4 times that." Explain the multiplier, explain profit, overhead, crash course at just a lunch one day. And there was something vastly different between Bruce, who was my essential rich dad, and the poor dad, who was the dad who raised me. Love them both. I'm not trying to be disparaging. I'm only referencing Robert Kiyosaki's very famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that I only read about 10 years ago, and then kind of had this realization, like, oh gosh, that was my experience. Bruce had no anxiety when it came to money. It wasn't that he was rich or anything. It was just he had no anxiety around it. It was because he was an entrepreneur. He could make his own way. He was in control of his own destiny in his life for the most part, right? You still got to get clients and all the other good stuff. But if you're good at your job, if you're good at your profession, if you're good at your business, you really do steer the ship. And so But at the end of the summer, he pulls me aside one more time and says, like, what do you want to be? And I go, you. Not that I want to take your job, but like, how do I become you? And he said one of the most mature things a man has ever said to me, just like emotionally mature. And he goes, well, next summer you don't work for me then. You go work for another general contractor. You learn a different trade. And I was just like so sold on it. I did. That's what I did. So next summer, I think I went and worked concrete after that. Then the next summer, I went and did like finish work. And next summer was like siding and windows. I just kept going. And then I wanted to be a builder first. I graduated high school, went to tech school for 2 years. And that's when I went to tech school is when another light bulb went off. And I went, what about an architect? Like looking at these blueprints, I could get the clients first, roll them into building clients. And then I applied to North Dakota State and went to architecture school and just fell in love with architecture, designing, all of that. And it was actually in my early career in architecture school, it was actually to my detriment that I had all the building experience, because architecture school is very ethereal, kind of foo-foo. You got to teach design. I'm a professor too, so I believe it should be taught that way. And it only became later on in my life, and there was some foreshadowing from my early professors there. He goes like, you got to kind of let go of that stuff for now. I promise you, his name is Daryl. I'll come back. It'll come back to you, and it's very important. And it only until maybe 7 or 8 years ago did it really come back into the fold for me in this trifecta architect, entrepreneur, architect, real estate developer, builder, to where I started to put the whole together and kind of became this force. For good building.
That's interesting. I did learn firsthand the value of an architect. I live in a home now. My wife and I built this home 18 years ago. We bought the dirt on a hill and hired a soils engineer to, move the dirt around and all that, and then hired an architect. Well, at least here in California, I'm not sure if it's countrywide, you don't technically need an architect to design a home. A commercial building, yes, but not a home. Mm-hmm. But we hired an architect, which I'm very grateful for today, and we hired a general contractor. And it took a year to build the home, and during the construction, I would visit the work site twice a day, on my way to work, on my way home from work, and then on weekends. And at some point, even though we approved the blueprints and the basic design, as it started getting built, I noticed that in one particular area in the kitchen, we had a long counter, and the counter was 5 feet deep by 18 feet long. And at the end of the counter, this wall kind of went up, just the width of the counter, or the depth of the counter, went up to the ceiling. And it didn't seem to be a problem when I looked at it on a two-dimensional blueprint. But when I was sitting at the counter, on the other side of that 5 foot wide wall was a huge bay window. I'm like, okay, this wall's in the wrong place. This has no purpose of this wall being here. So I asked the builder, I said, let's just take the wall down. I don't like the look of it. It's obstructing a view. I didn't notice it on the blueprint. He goes, okay, yeah, no problem. Let me just run it by the architect. And I'm like, oh, no. You don't. I mean, if you want to, you can, but no need. I just would prefer not to have the wall. He goes, let me just run it by the architect to be sure. And of course, as you can expect, it was a load-bearing wall. And they basically had to put a post there, and then they just decorated it with fine wood carpentry and to make it look nice. And the architect came down, and he said, I put this here just to kind of cover the beam. And I said, well, I don't like it. And what can you do? He goes, so we negotiated, and the result was they'll strip it down to just the beam, and then they'll bring in the fine carpenters to, box in the beam, make it look real pretty. I'm like, okay. And it's only now, 8 inches by 8 inches, rather than, 5 feet. That's when I realized the value of the architect. If the builder had just said, all right, get out the chainsaw, let's just whack it down, I may have had a 1-story house versus a 2, at least in that part of the house. So, I definitely have a huge appreciation for architects and an absolute awe over craftsmen. I had not really been on a build site before. I didn't really know what to expect, but the subs that my builder hired were artisans. I would stand. They probably thought I was a little freaky or creepy because I would just stand in a corner and just watch them work, and I was absolutely amazed at the skill and I don't think I'm over exaggerating, at least with some of the subs, the artistry that they were able to, put on our home. It was absolutely amazing to watch. But I digress. When you and Alex launched F9 Productions, were there any particular problems that you were trying to solve, or did you have a goal to be different? And what were the problems, if there were any, and what were the differences that you sought out to make, as opposed to just another architectural firm?
Oh God, yeah, right. And that's all architects, and I'm very careful with using absolute language, but I would say all architects are trying to be different, right? So it was like, oh, well, how do we be different from everybody who's also trying to be different? Huge task. Except it wasn't. And if you go to my LinkedIn, you'll notice my preferred pronouns are positive reactionary. So I've always been a contrarian, and why I'm framing it with the positive reactionary stuff is like Alex and I were born as entrepreneurs in the Great Recession. F9 was born in the Great Recession after being laid off from folks we had very negative experiences with. The firm I worked for in Boulder, they were so bad at business that I remember before I got laid off, getting them to a sales meeting with one of my cousins who was a part of this firm in Denver that helped folks procure federal work, public work, state work, publicly funded stuff, which they wanted to get into. And I'll never forget my cousin, who was the same age as me at this time. I think we were only maybe like 25, 26, young bucks. And he looks at the principal. I'm sitting there with the principal, and he says, well, how are you guys getting work now? And he goes, oh, referrals. How are you advertising? And he looked like a deer in the headlights. It was like and I at that point I went, oh, wow. Oh my goodness. There are these architects. It really is there's this old guard holding a lot of cards right now that is completely missing the internet. They're 100% missing the internet. Social media hadn't even really, it was starting. Instagram was just starting. Facebook had been in the works for a couple of years. It was still on the rise, right? LinkedIn had been around for a while. But people were, just kind of clunking around trying to understand how social media worked. And then there was the whole lens of kind of my eyes opening up further and going, yeah, there's a reason why a lot of architects that I know complain about, why do these general contractors make so much more money than us? Why do the developers make more money than us? We're the valuable ones, we're the ones that create the magic that you kind of have talked about in your house too, Mike. We're the one. If without us, how would the commercial buildings get built, right? Because
Right.
there's laws for it and everything. And it's like, well, you don't view it through a business lens, architects. And so we went, all right, we're going to be the opposite. We're going to positively react to all the negative stuff that is going on in the architectural business world. And so the first one was we just embraced online marketing. We ran right at lead generation services and tested them all out. And Yelp, Google Business Listings, Thumbtack.com we use a lot. Putting time and effort into our website. We used Craigslist very, very early on to advertise and help we stood out from the crowd in that way. And then there was just fundamental stuff that eventually became part of our F9 principles. We have 9 principles that we live by on the website. And that is, number 4 is like one of the ones that we stood out right away is like, let's communicate. Let's not be those architects that we hear about when we get the calls from potential clients and this was very early on. We got so many calls right away. I still get them. Matter of fact, I had a guy yesterday fired the other architect and want to hire us because he goes, I cannot get the guy to call me back. I can't get him to pick up the phone. Like, I'm like, oh my God, still in this day and age.
The
And it's
basics.
a F4. Yeah. Oh yeah, F4, communicate. And so we have a rule that you have to get back to clients, consultants, fellow staff members, anybody we're working with, ideally within 1 hour. Text, email, call, doesn't matter. And no later than 24 hours. And that alone, I mean, I try to not, like, even though they're ranked 1 through 9 on the website and what we do, and they drive our culture of high quality customer service and architectural and through, and then, beautiful architectural design. It's I probably bring that one up more than any one of them. It's the communication has just went so far for us, and just picking up the phone, being responsive, and treating every single client. Doesn't matter if they're lower middle class, middle class, upper middle class, the 1%, they're all number one. Like, they're number one. They're all priority. They're all paying our bills, and their reviews matter. Who they talk to matters. That's been the biggest differentiator from us. We already were award-winning designers and architects coming out of college. Alex and I, we had won multiple awards already, and then then in the early years of practice, we won even more, and we're still winning stuff. It's like, we know that the design talent is already there. It's the other stuff that I think are overlooked by most architects.
Yeah, I think that's not unique to architects. There are plenty of doctors who their version of principles would be, one of them might be bedside manner. They may have none. I think in the professional world, where there's a lot of education, a lot of experience needed to perform their trade, business acumen is not one of them. And when I started my business, I own a factory that builds equipment for the electronics manufacturing industry, and I designed all the equipment that we sell, and decided I couldn't get anyone to actually buy it from me. So, in terms of selling them the rights to it, so I just did it myself. I had a very strong technical acumen, like you had a very strong architectural acumen, but I had absolutely no business sense. You I'm in awe of, because you learned that even before you started your company, which is very unusual. I had to learn that after almost losing my company multiple times. Like, what's missing? Oh yeah, business. But so F9, I'm always very curious where names come from. So F9, 9 principles. You have another company on the construction side, which you call F14. Does that mean you have 5 more principles in the construction side than you do the architectural side, or where does the numbering structure come from?
Yeah, we did, and we do. Except we actually downsized and restructured F14 recently. For my whole life, I wanted a construction crew. Like, literally, I wanted carpenters paid by me, not subbed out and everything like that. And I tried that for 4 or 5 years. It worked and it didn't. It worked and it didn't. And finally, it didn't work. Bruce was right. His wife was right. There's things that they told me about having your own construction crew where I was like, come on. It's sort of like having when you think your mom and dad are just never right, and eventually become you have children, and you go, hey, and then you call them one day, because I have, and I go, hey, I just want to say we're right.
Yeah, hard words to say. Yeah, in the moment, hard words to say.
Yeah, I've happily eaten crow on that. Because I have 4 children, and I'm just like, oh wow, you were right about the teenage years. So,
and they're going to say that to you someday. Just remember that someday you'll get the dad you were right. Yeah,
I'm praying. Praying for this, Mike.
Of course.
Yeah. But the F9 actually comes from something different. So when we started our architecture firm, again, just to remind the audience, Alex was in New York City working for a very, very famous, world famous, one of the best architects, Daniel Libeskind. They redid the World Trade Centers after they went down in 9/11. That kind of caliber of architecture firm. And he got laid off. Same thing. It was like, architecture's not good at business. Doesn't care about diversity of work, sustainability, an ecosystem being vertically integrated like we are, all that stuff. And then I was laid off from the other respective firm who was they were AIA Colorado or AIA National Architects of the Year. I mean, really good. And one of them still in business. Amazing designer. I'll never take that away from him. Very, very good architect, but just horrible at business. And so because our very short, first internships were like 9 months. That's not enough time to get anything built, get photographed, be able to take credit for it. We had no built work. And here we are starting this architecture firm, trying to convince people they should hire us on their multi-million-dollar projects, young bucks. And all we had was the renderings, architectural renderings, these photorealistic renderings from the software we used to use, which is 3ds Max. And the hotkey on the keyboard to execute those renderings was F9. So all we had was F9 Productions.
Love it.
And it's an obscure name. I love it still. My business partner's still struggling with it. He's actually starting to struggle with it lately because he's like, shouldn't we have the word named architect in it? And I go, there's other ways around that.
I love the fact that even the word productions is in there as opposed to, architectural design professionals or something like that. Not knowing anything about you, when I first came across your profile and I saw that, co-founder F9 Productions, my first thought was, oh, you're some kind of content creator or video production studio or something like that. Or maybe racing. I don't know, 'cause Formula F, but that's interesting. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in the first few years in building your firm? Besides everything.
Besides everything, and besides being in the heart of the Great Recession, and just 50% of architects, engineers, and contractors were laid off during that time. 50%. It was
That's
people.
Brutal. Yeah.
Oh gosh, people gripe about the first tech recession and then the second tech recession, which just occurred, where like 10 to 20%. And it's like, hey man,
Ain't
I
seen
know
nothing.
people,
Yeah.
and seen nothing. I know people, colleagues who it actually makes me kind of sad. Like some of the folks that I went to school with, who actually never got to become an architect. They just had to go somewhere else and find other stuff. And they were brilliant designers, genius level people, very high IQs and stuff like that. So the challenges were, first of all, just like how to find work. How do you do it? How do you price yourself? How do you figure all of that out? How do you make yourself stand out? How do you survive? That's that was some of the struggles. And then how do you convince people to hire you, right? And it was like through these renderings, but then also my business partner, I wish he was here right now because he could tell a story, so I'll try to do it too, is one of the very first like substantial projects we got was this duplex. For us, it was a big deal. It's still on our website. It's called the Golden Duplex. And it was this developer who he was a realtor first, then he was flipping houses, which is kind of a lot of these developers that have become very good friends. Like that's how they get in. That's how they start. And he bought, during the Great Recession, there were so many properties that just like people just walk away from and go to like Florida and like never be seen again. One of those kind of stories.
Sure.
So there was one of these properties where there was already these duplexes around this site where this new duplex was going to go, and all they got finished was the foundations. So he bought this property for nothing. And the foundations are already poured, and he got in contact with us, and he goes, "Hey, I want to reuse the foundations, but I don't want to do these clunky kind of like 1990s style. I would like to do some contemporary, modern, open floor plan stuff. What can you do?" He was very hesitant about hiring us, and sometimes potential clients, will push me over the edge a little bit. It kind of get me a little not angry. I would just say my patience breaks, and then I go full salesman, kind of like Jonathan Belfort from Wall Street, Wolf of Wall Street, and Belfort. And that's what I did in this meeting. And Al whispers to me. He goes, we're on speaker, and he goes, "Tell him about your building experience." That's because he could sense that was the hesitation, that since we were so young. And I just went off, and I told them about, like, there's not an architect in the state who can hold a hammer like they, all just kind of,
There you
I'm
go.
that guy. Yeah, yeah. Like, they can't even hold a hammer. I can, they can barely even look at it. And, I've had one in my hand since I was 13. I went off for about like 30, 40 seconds, and you could tell. And Tim is this client, and you call him Timmy. And I could tell, like, he just lit up. That's what he wanted to hear, and he hired us. So that was really difficult. Is like, how do you start breaking into work you've never done? How do you convince people to help you do it? And a lot of it is just confidence. A lot of it is confidence. You got to have some guts. You got to have some how to, and a leap of faith in yourself.
Was there one particular moment when you realized that the firm had turned a corner from a startup company to a sustainable business?
Yeah, it's when we started our our own podcast inside the firm. So most businesses fail within the first 7 years. It's a empirically proven statistic, right? So we started technically in 2010, and then in 2017, what had happened is we had just completed the second design build project, where we really started to become this vertically integrated firm. That wasn't just architects, where we started to build and then eventually develop. And the project was two tiny houses. We had been on HGTV a couple years earlier before that. It still felt very startup-y when we were on HGTV. And because we had to take out a business loan to even build this tiny house that we had this vision for a while, we took a leap of faith. We built it. We were on HGTV every 2 weeks. Amazing exposure that we couldn't have possibly paid for. It was sort of us advertising in a way.
Sure.
Huge. And then we won an international architecture award for that project. And Subaru saw us, and they were just enamored by this architecture that we essentially invented. It was these super modern tiny houses that folded. They were like transformers on wheels. One of the most difficult things I've ever built, even to this day. And I'm building like multi-million-dollar homes at this point that are, for elite people. And they contacted us and they said, "Hey, we signed HGTV. We want you to build 2 more of them, but they got to be, twice as big, twice as bad, twice as foldable." And I was just like shuddering at the idea. But Alex was gung ho about it. And I go, "Look, that was so hard, Al, to build." And he goes, "Well, what if I tell him this number and they go for it?" And I go, "All right." I mean, there's nothing my wife could say at that point. Like, what was she going to say?
Yeah.
She likes money too.
Yeah.
She likes to be secure and stay-at-home wife. So he showed them. They didn't even blink. And it was, again, like another leap up of one of the hardest things to design, build, all that.
Yep.
We successfully delivered the projects. We finally earned enough money and had enough profit to buy the third of an acre of land that we wanted to up in the north part of the city we operate in, to then take the leap to become full-fledged real estate developers and do the whole trifecta. And that's when it felt like we finally went over the plateau a little bit, and we could see the next hilltop, the next mountaintop to start climbing on. And then that's why we started the show, because we wanted to tell everybody, hey, the American dream is still alive. It's still here. You just have to, millennials, you guys have to play your cards very, very carefully. Yeah. That's the issue. It's not that you're not playing. You are playing. And we wanted to really be this light and this beacon for people.
That's great. Maybe I'm not 100% accurate on this, but anecdotally anyway, what I've witnessed is people who start companies in a creative field, like architects, struggle to balance creativity and profitability. Sometimes they're at odds with each other. How do you maintain both without compromising either?
Boy, that's a good question. Well, it's tricky because then there's budgets, right? You gotta right. play with to make it happen. Yeah, exactly. I think you have to just tell the truth at all times, and you have to be very careful about it, and you have to understand. You have to boil things down to their fundamentals. So being a professor has taught me this. At teaching at UCU Boulder and North Dakota State, being a practicing professor, somebody that can go in and go, hey, I'm a practicing architect, and talk with these students. And what it was a really good example of that is, especially in architecture or even building, I think, if you even as a builder, is I've told my students this many times, is I go, there's no excuse for a bad space plan. There's no excuse for a bad floor plan. And here's why, is because that might be all you get. We might have to strip that project down from all the cool bells and whistles and fancy finishes and all of this to where all we get is a good space plan, a great space plan. And then I add on like the sustainability aspect of that. Like how many houses in America are designed such that where it's like, gosh, it's so compartmentalized. We need to just open up the floor plan. We can't live like this. Or there's bad space planning, and like, well, now we're taking down all the walls and throwing all this stuff away and having to make new spaces and new materials and all this other stuff. So that's what it really is like you got to boil down the problem to its fundamentals and then come up with a brilliant solution that no one can really take away from you, because it's fundamental to the structure of the thing you're creating, right? Just like yourselves, like it's the skeleton that you're after, right? It's the very, very core of the essence. And if you can capture that, there's still going to be great building, great design. It just might not look as pretty. It might not be diamond encrusted. But whatever, it's still, the space is diamond
Yeah,
spaced.
sure. You also, in addition to running your firm, you also co-host a podcast called Inside the Firm with your, I think that's with your co-founder, Alex, right?
Mm-hmm.
What inspired you to start sharing your business experience publicly, and what impact has that had on your firm? You alluded to it earlier that the podcast kind of changed things at the company, but what,
Yeah.
lay that out for me.
You're still seeing echoes of this with not to get too political, but like the recent elections in New York City, right, where the youth are electing these folks who are interested in pushing anti-capitalistic
Yeah.
processes in America, and that really pains me to see that happen, because I grew up in like socialized housing and medicine as a half Native American person in America, and I'm here to tell you, like, it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's hard to escape. I'm one of the very rare ones to escape that situation. Very, very rare. And so there was even more of that stuff being strewn about in the headlines. I felt like from my generation. I'm like sort of in between Gen X and millennial, but like there's enough of me that's millennial where I go like, hey guys and gals, this is not the way forward. Gen Z, this is not the way forward. And we wanted to just share bare bones how we did it from nothing. It's like you want to blame all this privilege that people have on success. It's like, where was our privilege? None. Like none. We were just thrown out on the streets essentially, right? Laid off from these firms, no help, no net, nothing like that. And we bootstrapped our way to multiple businesses with success. It really comes down to drive and fundamentals. And that's why we wanted to start the show. I mean, really, that really is it is. And it's not so much about we're talking about fancy architecture or anything like that. It is truly entrepreneurial and just sharing the bare bones and explaining how people can do it, how they can follow our lead. And I think we're on episode like 712 or something like that. We've been doing it for a long time.
Wow.
But I got to tell you, the reason I'm stating that is like, it's a slog. It's a slog, right? To do it, it's like we're not really getting paid for it. I mean, yes, we have some wonderful sponsors and that pay us to read copies, but like we're not getting rich off of it. And there's something like that. It's a labor of love for sure. But the thing that keeps us going is when, it's sort of like we'll be coming up on a Friday, because that's when we do 2 shows a week. One is a show like this where I'm interviewing people like you. The other one is a Friday where it's the pilot and like me and Al are talking. And we'll be coming up and I'll be like, I'm just tired. Can we just skip this week? then I'll get that text, I'll get that email, I will get the LinkedIn direct message from a listener who will reach out of the blue, and they'll go, "Hey, long time listener, been listening for like since the beginning. Just want to let you know this is the week I decided to quit my job and start my own business." And I'm like, "Oh, you just
Yeah,
hit me.
you're
You
good
hit
for
me
another
right."
100 episodes now, right?
Yep.
It's fuel in the tank. I'm the exact same way. I have two podcasts. One is a technical podcast on the subject of reliability of electronics. That's my professional world, and then this one. And I don't. I'm nowhere near your quantity. I think I have about 185 episodes of the technical podcast, and this podcast is relatively new. This is episode number 42 as we're recording this. But I, it, you know, I one of the bits of advice I got when I first started a podcast several years ago was keep doing it. Keep doing it. You know, at first when you're staring into a camera, I mean, you were quite literally on episode 1 talking to nobody, right? Because there's no catalog out there. You haven't even posted it to the sites yet. So that's a strange feeling. And then eventually you notice, oh, look, I got a couple subscribers. And then eventually got a few more subs and a few more subs. And then at some point, particularly with my other podcast, when I'm at a conference, speaking at a conference or whatever, people in my industry know who I am quite well. They'll come up to me and talk about, hey, I listened to episode 117, and oh my God, that solved the problem. Like, that's awesome. That's as close to a paparazzi TMZ fan stalker moment I'm ever going to have. But I absolutely love it, and it is nice to finally get some of that feedback. And I also find that one of the best ways to sell is to stop talking about what you do and connect with your potential customer on an emotional level. I refer to that as conscious marketing. And by creating content that's helpful, that's just putting value out without the expectation, without necessarily the giant call to action, without the call now, operators are standing by, here's a discount coupon code and all that. Just by keeping it real, by providing value, that establishes authority, and that allows you to become, and I hate this word because it's been overused, but an influencer, an authority-based influencer in your space. If I were to build a home today, I love my builder, by the way. 18 years ago, he built my home, and we're still personal friends. He comes to our house all the time. But if I didn't know him, I watched several of your episodes, Inside the Firm episodes, particularly the ones where you talk about the firm and the architecture and stuff. You would be on my top of my list to call an interview because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've seen some of his work. I've heard him talk. They talk about the business. They share stuff. They talk to other entrepreneurs about entrepreneurial journeys and best practices in business and things like that. These guys seem like they know what they're doing. And you would just come in with a whole ton more credibility than someone with a 5-star Yelp review only, right? Because it's real, it's authentic, and I can see the character behind the slogans. And I think that's a lesson a lot of business owners, not everyone should start a podcast, but the point of providing value and just doing things right and let the business come in, as opposed to just trying to go business hunting, customer hunting. It's not that difficult to get customers. It's very difficult to get good customers and ones that partner with you, ones that form a relationship as opposed to just a transaction, ones that still come over to my house almost 2 decades after building the house as my friend rather than my vendor. Looking ahead, what's next for F9 and for you personally as an entrepreneur?
Great question. Yeah. I refocus a lot because I have these ideas that I end up that get proven false, right? Through the feedback loop of entrepreneurship and business ownership. One of them that has been proven false lately is the last couple of years is maybe I don't want to grow bigger than a staff of 12. We're at a staff of 10 right now. And it's lessons from other people. Some of our best consultants that we've worked with, I've watched them break off from big firms, and they start out amazing. 1 to 2 people. They're fast, they're nimble. We throw all our business at them because they're so fast, they're so nimble, they're keeping up with us. High level of customer service. Word gets out. People keep gravitating towards these guys. There's these guys and gals. Then they grow. Then they get to 12, and then they go past 12, and then they become B or C level again.
Yep.
It's just shocking to me. And I've kept bringing this up to my business partner, and he goes, who's Al, who's a veteran, been in the Army, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I'll explain that on the show. That has everything to do with platoon sizes and command and control." And I went, "Really?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, our U.S. Army has figured this out a long, long time ago." And I can't remember what episode it was, but he broke it down beautifully. He made a graphic and everything and showed it to me, and I went, "Oh, well, I'm not sure. Maybe we want to go bigger than 12 then. Maybe we want to stay this size." And I think we do actually. And I'm very convinced of just capping it at 12. And I even know who I want to add to the team. So right now we have 8 architects, 2 interior designers. I want to add 2 more interior designers to the staff. And the end goal is to still have 3 offices throughout Colorado. We have 2 right now, 1 in northern Colorado, 1 in central and southern Colorado, and then get 1 out in the Mountain West of the Continental Divide, so we can then truly serve the whole state. And people can find us, just with the Google search or the AI search and everything like that. So we have a actual physical presence in those places, because I still believe in the physicality, especially when you are in an industry like ours that mixes heavily with the blue collar. And then we also build, obviously. So we are literally half blue collar. And the value of, look, the text, the emails, they still work really well, but like picking up that phone, glad handing, solving problems on the site, meeting in person, very important. Very, very important. And I don't think we'll ever lose that, thank God. I mean, I think a lot of people were really gravitating towards that in the pandemic. They were just like leaping for joy that we were going to be this purely digital society, and I was just hating all of that. So that's where we want to head next. Is I think we're trying to figure out how to get to 12 people in the next 2 to 3 years. Hopefully, if the economy picks up. It's just kind of slow and steady right now. And then how do we break into the real Mountain West? Because we do mountain work right now east of the Continental Divide. Mm-hmm. But to get to the west, over in the Aspen, Telluride, Vail, where the big bucks are, and the
ka-ching, yeah, sure.
Is a whole nother endeavor. So that's hopefully where we're headed. I have the vision of F9 Mountain West division, like a kind of like a. I even have like a little logo made up already and stuff like that.
You're already there in your head, right?
Yeah.
All you need to do is do it, execute. Your point of size really strikes home to me. There was a time when I was building my business when things were kind of tough. I believed, I was convinced that the solution to every problem was to grow ourselves out of it. And, we just need more sales. Well, things are tough. Well, we just need more. And of course, in retrospect, I realized that when you double your sales, if you don't fix the root causation of the problem, if you double your revenue, your problems go up exponentially. So you might quadruple your problems just from doubling your sales. And there were several times when I've had my business now for 33 years, so I've got more than 3 decades of charts I can look at. And there's our business would go on a rapid growth, and then it would plateau, and then it would grow again and plateau and grow again and plateau. And there were times when we were here, when I would look back of when we were down here with envy. Like, things were so much better then. We made more money. We had less revenue, but things were simpler. I didn't need as much staff. I didn't need as big a building. I didn't need to carry as much inventory. I wish we were back down here. And then we wouldn't get into another sweet spot again until, a few years later, once we were past it. And so I think there is a certain seduction of growth that many entrepreneurs have, business founders have, that in many, many cases, drives businesses out of business. You talked earlier about the statistics. It's to quote your statement and to quantify it, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics states that 80% of all businesses ultimately fail, more than half by year between 5 and 7.
Yep.
Those are terrible odds. But I think the reason so many businesses fail statistically isn't because business is inherently risky. It's because the founders, the managers in that business, make the very same mistakes all the other 80% of all the other entrepreneurs have made, which are easy to make because they're intuitive. Avoiding those mistakes sometimes seems counterintuitive, like less is more, like sometimes no is more profitable than yes. Saying no to a customer. We choose our customers, if not as much, maybe more than our customers choose us. All these things which seem counterproductive when you're in the grow, got to cover payroll, need more cash phase. So you're quite wise. I've got 33 years of doing this, and I wish I had come to that conclusion much earlier because I would have been to wherever I am today a little bit sooner. But then again, I'm grateful for the journey. One kind of oddball question: when I was researching you, I saw a link to one of your YouTube channels, and I figured, it's going to be an architectural channel, and or business channel, or something like design channel, construction channel, and I was blown away. It was a fishing channel. You have tons of video. I mean, really high quality production video of fishing, for everything from shoreline type fishing to ice fishing, which seems to be a passion of yours. I saw one video where you and your friends were all kind of kicked off the ice by a ranger or something because you were on the ice a couple of weeks too early. and at the very last second, someone caught a fish and they said, okay, we're out of here now. But where does that passion come from, and what made you start your own channel on that?
My whole life is the law of polarity just freaks me out in such a good way. My whole life, it seems like, is influenced by this natural physical law, which is a real thing. And, with the negative comes the positive. And I'm just always so thankful for the negative stuff. So one of the big negative things was, the pandemic totally sucked for everybody. And at the same time, my children became teenagers right around then and wanted nothing to do with us. And then the third thing that happened was we had just finished our real estate development. There was a point where I worked 80 days in a row. I took one day off, sort of, I guess. I laid on the couch and just did admin work that day. But it was 80 days in a row because I got so physically sick. It was exhausted. I had my tool bags on. I mean, I was truly back into carpenter mode, working GC. And I got burnt out. For me, that was my midlife crisis. I'm 42, and it was definitely my midlife crisis, maybe a little earlier than true midlife. And I was looking at all these things as I was in this hole, and I went, holy cow, I forgot why I moved here from so long ago. Because I grew up, as you stated in my bio, like working in Idaho, Montana. And the other thing we did is we would vacation every summer. My family would vacation. Sometimes grandma would take us for 6 weeks, sometimes over to my aunt's cabin on Crater Lake in Idaho. Beautiful place. She had like 5 cabins, and it was phenomenal. It was just like a child's paradise, right? Yeah. Running all over the place, catching trout. And then we would, my nucleus family, we'd vacation in Montana and go all over the place, fly fishing for trout. And it was like, I forgot about the mountains and fishing. And I was so physically pulled, like my soul I could just feel it being pulled to the mountains. And I became obsessed and just incessant on it for about a couple years. I mean, I was going 3 or 4 times a week. I would just take off work as much as I could. Kind of was absent for a while, for better or for worse. And I would go on these amazing, and I still do, obviously. I would go up to all the way to the Continental Divide and experience these places where you got to hike 4 or 5 miles, 2,000, 2,500 kind of elevation gain, extremely remote. Some of them 100% off trail, off grid, to these magical alpine glacial lakes and creeks that almost nobody touches ever. Mm-hmm. They're just so remote. And I would have these amazing experiences and adventures solo or with one of my sons, to where I went, there's a big portion of the world population, especially the United States, that will never experience this. And I would love to share it with everybody. And I would love to just have record of it for when I'm old and I can't make it up there anymore. And I was like, I already got a podcast. I'm already kind of a personality. Like, I want to film this stuff. And the other thing, truth be told, is my brother's a professional bow hunter. His name is Lucas Cayko. You look at him, he's very famous. There's a shadow of being a big brother that has a little brother like him who's I wanted to come out from. He's this avid outdoorsman. We grew up very outdoorsy. And I was like, well, I'm the fisherman. And I always wanted to fulfill one like entrepreneurial thing. I'm this serial entrepreneur. Is like, my mom was consistently telling this story throughout my life of, well, Lance wanted to be a professional fisherman. When his second grade teacher, he had to write down what he wanted to be. And I was like, I remembered all this stuff. And so I made I started filming myself, started learning how to do video editing, and started to put together these episodes of these adventures way up in the mountains for people, for myself, for my family, for my friends, for my children. And that's really what drove the whole thing and what continues to drive it. And then I ended up making, it does pay a little bit. We have sponsors. The biggest thing is I've now had this huge network of fishing buddies that they're just some of the best people on the planet. I'm just kind of never lonely in that sort of regard. My wife even agrees. She's like, the best thing is like all these fishing buddies you have now. She's like, they're just awesome people, a lot of integrity and stuff like that. So that's where the Fishing with Lance story comes from. And then the sort of cherry on top is, I think in year 2 or something, I'd made my first cent, and I got that check printed off, and I made a plaque for Mom and autographed it with my picture and everything, and Fishing with Lance and all of that, and gave it to her for Mother's Day. I'm like, there you go, professional fisherman.
Yeah. So your brother doesn't have one up on you now. He might be a professional bow hunter, but he's not Fishing with Lance.
He's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. All right. Last question. We're about out of time. How did you define success when you first started your company, and how do you define it today?
First was just survival. We're successful if we survive. We are successful if we survive. Now, you touched on this. It's 3 things. I tell all my staff this. I go, our goal should be at the end of every project to get 3 things: a fee, a friend, and a photo. And that's a successful project.
That's great. For my audience who would like to get more information on F9 Productions, if you're watching this on YouTube, just look down here somewhere, and there'll be a link to F9 Productions there. There will also be a link to Inside the Firm, the podcast by Lance and Alex, and there will also be a link if you're a fisherman of any sort or you're interested in that subject. There'll be a link to Fishing with Lance there as well. So Lance Cayko, F9 Productions, thank you so much for your generous contribution of time and wisdom and sharing your journey and your insights into business with me and my audience. I really appreciate it, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. A very special thanks to Lance Cayko for being my guest on the show. We've been busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. And one personal favor, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. Those 2 simple clicks really help us expand our reach. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, I'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com to apply or recommend a guest. You can also reach me directly at mike@reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com. And a very quick shameless plug, if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup, From Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and on Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. Thanks again for listening or watching. Until next time, be unstoppable.